Cool. Hi, everyone. What an exciting speaking slot after lunch with technical issues, and I'm on my hotspot, and hopefully it doesn't disconnect, but we'll see. This microphone is also very close to my face. Hi. My name's Amara Graham. I'm super excited to talk to you today. I heard another speaker mention that this was like a bucket list conference for them. Same. So I'm super excited to be here, and this is the first talk that I have ever done where I'm talking about my feelings, which seems very, very strange. Like, I would much rather stand up here and give you like a tech demo, because if it fails, we all go, oh, that's how tech demos work. But if I fail at describing my feelings, I don't know what that says about me. I don't know. So anyway, I want to talk about my year of no. And for the folks in the room who know me, this might be very polar opposite to our interactions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We can go on this journey together and get to know each other. And I can talk a little bit more about how this is kind of the opposite of who I am, but gave me a really great opportunity to learn more about myself, learn more about the places and spaces that enable me to thrive, and hopefully inspire you to do the same. Cool, and it didn't freeze this time. So again, this talk is going to be about my feelings, and I wanted to kind of put up this disclaimer to say that this happened years ago. This is actually like coming from a pre-pandemic situation. So this is the first talk that I'm sharing my feelings, like I mentioned. And this is the first time that I've talked about this publicly. So there are some people in the room that would potentially be able to connect the dots and be like, oh, I know you're a manager, I know your employer, I know this, I know that. I don't care. But I would ask that you kind of focus on what I'm delivering rather than connecting those dots, because at the end, I have grown from it, I have moved on, and I would like to share that experience rather than have you connect all those dots. So please do me that favor. All right, so again, very different than a tech talk. I'm going to introduce myself through a bunch of photos, none of which are work-related, other than the emojis. So let me take you back to 2018, again, pre-pandemic, wild. 2018 for me was an incredible year in my personal and professional life. I was an individual contributor, developer advocate. I was heavily invested in the democratization of AI and looking for pretty much anywhere and everywhere where people could use AI services to make their lives better, make their solutions easier, kind of lift them from having that burden of trying to figure out what is AI. I was getting married without a wedding coordinator, which anyone who's had that experience knows it's a lot. And then we decided to move across a few time zones, so now we were having what kind of felt like a remote planned wedding, which I'd probably be really good at now, but I was not so good at back then. So we're doing that. We're also coordinating a cross-country move with my cat in the bag down there. He hated every moment of it. He likes moving under his own power and only his own power, so shoving him in a bag was just a no-go for him. And throughout this entire year, I had convinced myself that I was capable of doing anything and everything that came my way, and I had no evidence to believe that I couldn't do that. I did everything, and I did everything in a way that I was impressed with myself. Other people were impressed. They were like, how are you doing all of these things? So some of the pictures up here, my lovely partner and husband, JJ, I was introducing him to Texas bluebonnets for the first time. That was an experience. He's actually from the other Portland, which makes this trip even weirder, because I keep saying I'm in Portland. He's like, not the right Portland. Okay. So introducing him to Texas, like I said, getting married, planning all of that, keeping up with work as I'm moving from San Francisco to Austin, Texas, getting married in Oregon, building a house in Austin. All of that stuff is happening while I'm also going to conferences, traveling, all of that fun stuff. But the real kicker was, as I was feeling kind of this superhuman strength of look at all of the things that I can do, I'm unstoppable, I kind of finished the end of the year with my first international speaking engagement, which is like, oh my gosh, this is incredible too, to get this opportunity to speak internationally, how awesome. I finish my talk, I walk off stage and find out that instead of my coworkers talking about, this opportunity that I had and celebrating that I was able to do this, they proceeded to have a discussion about how I was clearly ungrateful because I was wearing the thin, flimsy cotton t-shirt with my company's logo on it, and instead wore a sweater dress made by a particular designer that I find very empowering and inspiring when I wanted to look nice on stage. So I go back to my hotel, have a good long cry, because that was what the year was. It was high highs, low lows, and even though I had done everything I possibly could, I still had people saying like, yeah, but she didn't wear the right clothing to the event. Like, cool, thanks. So, how I went into 2019. So I'm coming off of this year that I knew that I couldn't repeat. Maybe I should say that I shouldn't repeat it, because again, felt unstoppable, kind of bringing some of that energy into this year, but then also in the back of my mind, or maybe not in the back of my mind, hearing those coworkers that are like, you're doing a lot, but you're still not doing enough. Couple things happened there. One was I recognized very quickly that there was a fundamental mismatch in my career goals and organizational priorities. So this meant things like I had a kick-ass year, but I wasn't promoted. And this is one of those things where I was like, well, if I didn't get promoted this year when I had a rock star year and I had people telling me that, something has to change, because I don't understand what else I could do to gain that promotion. But that wasn't the biggest problem. I didn't really care so much that I wasn't promoted. The bigger problem was I wasn't even personally acknowledged for the work that I did. So at the company that I was at the time, there was this big company initiative. And like I said, I'm not going to go into details because we don't need to have a finger-pointing exercise. But what I really would have appreciated is someone saying, hey, when you were working, every waking hour for X amount of hours, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your hard work. I got a good job, team. Thanks, fam. We did it. And I was like, the fuck? Nowhere did I hear my name. Nowhere did I hear some of my other coworkers who worked really, really hard to pull this off. But again, we quickly learned something about the organization and the organizational priorities. There were really two people who were in charge of that particular initiative, and they were the ones that were getting the kudos. They were the ones that were getting the, you, insert name here, did a great job at this. The rest of us were just kind of along for the ride. Because to be promoted at this company, like many other companies, you need to own a something, not just do a something. You need to be known for a something. And at that point in time, I was known for doing the work, which is fine unless you're looking for something like a promotion, and that is not promotion worthy. So I collected my great job, fam, and decided that I needed to make a change, and immediately sat down and tried to figure out what that change was going to look like, but I knew I couldn't repeat the year that I had just had. So insert this book. Has anyone read this book? Oh my gosh, one person, two, three, kind of? Oh, my hands are going up. So I read Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes, How to Dance It Out, Stand in the Sun, and Be Your Own Person. I really enjoy nonfiction, but I'm not really into self-help type books, which this book kind of skirts that line. I'm more into biographies and memoirs because it helps me think about how people think or give me that glimpse into someone's life that isn't mine. So maybe you can see where this is going, or maybe not, who knows. So for those of you who may not know who Shonda Rhimes is, maybe you recognize this logo, or you know Shondaland from the different series that she has. I really only read this book because I'm a fan of the TV shows, or I was a fan of the TV shows. So it was things like Grey's Anatomy, these big universes that Shonda Rhimes had crafted. Like, certainly someone who's going to craft this fantastic fictional space and go through such a tremendous depth to do so she's got her life together, right? Like, I could learn from that. In more recent years, you may have seen it introduced through Peloton. She did a collaboration with them, doing a year of yes. And this is where I would say it started to creep more into that like self-help side of things. So you may be more familiar with this brand or this look of that. Despite being a Peloton user, I didn't catch on to this, which I think is kind of funny. But without spoiling the book or providing some kind of book review, because that's not what I'm here to do, Shonda Rhimes is an introvert, so saying yes doesn't come naturally to her. I've long been told that I could not possibly be an introvert. More recently, I think I've described myself as an ambivert, which I think is a very good indication. Like if you saw me on the cruise last night or as we were leaving, I was like, I'm done with people. I need to go home. I love all of you. You are very great people. I just reach my limit and I'm done. And I know that about myself, or I get mean, and nobody wants me to be mean. So again, I'm an ambivert, but I'm an extrovert out of self-preservation, which is like a whole separate other talk. So going back to Shonda here, so Shonda defaults to no. She's busy, she'd rather be by herself, and kind of all of those other things that we would associate with someone who is introverted or someone who defaults to no. But a powerful moment in the book for me is when she describes saying yes to saying no. Saying yes, for me, is super easy, but could I learn to say yes to say no? So maybe you do know where this is going at this point. So I realized the best thing I could do for myself was learn how to say yes to say no. Saying no to everything outside of my goals for the year. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be necessary to prevent the kind of burnout that makes you leave tech entirely. Like total, complete career change if I don't get this under control. I knew that this was what I needed to do, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to communicate it. This wasn't about my goals being better than anyone else's. This was truly about burnout prevention and preventative healing. And again, I needed to figure out how to package that in such a way that people understood that, rather than me just saying no to everyone and kind of trying to live in my own bubble. So I mentioned that I'm the person who like gets things done, right? So immediately I'm like, how would this impact my personal brand? If I'm always the person that people go to for help, if I'm always the person who people go to get things done, what happens when I start telling them no? So for someone like me, I'm a team player, I'm a go-getter, I'm type A. It had this potential to be detrimental to my career relationships, but also to my mental health, to take a drastic turn in the other direction. Saying yes was my comfort zone. So how could I go from being the person who always said yes, always saved the day, always got the job done, to the person who more than likely said no? Like Shonda, I needed to be my own person and pave a path forward inspired by saying no. And one of the things that I wanted to mention particularly to this group is burnout shouldn't be the only trigger that you need to make a change. I think that's the most abrupt or most obvious one to folks. But growing up, my dad would say things like everything in moderation, and like a bit like a mantra. And I wasn't living this. Like I mentioned earlier, there were times where I spent every waking hour on the phone, on the computer, trying to get things done, trying to make sure that we were able to meet those deadlines. I wasn't living the everything in moderation that I needed to, and I needed that hard reset. So in a sense, burnout did that for me. It showed me that I needed that hard reset. I know that there's things that have changed since then, so like burnout has made it into our mainstream lexicon. It doesn't make it easier to spot or avoid or even cope with, but I am very happy to hear that more people are talking about it, recognizing it, figuring out ways and tools to help people through it. But I do also want to mention that I didn't just need like a bubble bath to make myself happy. Like it wasn't like new year, new me, let's have a bubble bath and solve all of this. Like, no. So was I going to be able to pull this off? This was one of the things that I thought through quite a bit before I even approached my manager and said, you know, hey, I need some help here. I'd previously worked at Intel, and Intel talks about career progression or performance as, you own your own career. And as a recently graduated college student, I am looking at that going, you own your career, or you own your own career, what does that mean? Like, I don't know what to do with that. But as I've gotten more experience, I've realized it's really about advocating for yourself and your career decisions. And that's what I needed to do, and I needed to set up or package it in such a way that I was advocating for myself, I was advocating for my career decisions, and then I got to this weird place where I was like, it's pretty ridiculous that as a developer advocate, I was having a hard time advocating for myself when my role is literally to advocate for other people. So would I be able to pull this off? Of course, and I would need to use some of those same tactics that I use for developer advocacy. So this is kind of where I give you the tools to be successful or to navigate this if you or someone you know is going through this. My biggest thing is you need to gain support from your manager. And if you cannot gain support from your manager, I would encourage you to leave your manager. And part of that is you can't do this alone. It's not something that you can, again, exist in this little bubble and shield yourself from the rest of the world. But I truly believe that not being able to gain support from your manager in this situation is one of those more subtle signs of a toxic environment. You are going to face pushback when you tell people no, and you are going to need support. And if you don't have that support from your manager, it is the Everest that you will never be able to summit. The other thing that I would encourage people to do is tell everyone what you're doing early and often. I'm sure my coworkers, but particularly my teammates, thought I was nuts because I was like, I'm going to tell everyone no. Don't tell them to come and ask me to do this because the answer is no. And they were like, we get it. Like, you've told us this a billion times. I'm like, no, but I want you to support me. So when they come up and say, oh, so-and-so is mad at you for this, just say I'm not open to that opportunity and let them know. Back me up in that, and don't say things like, oh, well, if you asked her a second time, maybe she would say yes. No, the answer is no. It's still no. So tell everyone what you're doing early and often. When someone asks something like, how are you helping with the company initiative this year? I just simply said I'm not. And I wasn't the only person who wasn't helping out with the company initiative. There were other people. They were just less vocal about it. And typically when I told people, hey, it doesn't provide the opportunities to support my career goals, they get it. It takes them a little bit of a while, but they eventually understand what's going on there. And again, your coworkers are going to need to be able to support you and empower you. So the more clear conversations that you have with them, you help them understand that you're maybe working on a separate program, you're doing like an R&D project or something that has your full devotion. People understand that you're not always going to say yes to everything or be involved with everything. And setting those expectations is super important. So establishing goals and boundaries kind of along the way is also helpful in communicating what is happening here. It's really setting up everyone else for success with you, because again, there are going to be some things where you need to lean on other people. There are going to be projects where you're going to be involved with other people, but every opportunity and every time someone says, ooh, can you work on this? You don't have to say yes. Particularly in the AI space, this for me meant communicating to other people that I was not available to do AI advocacy for military use cases. And this was particularly important when I started working on game engines or game development, where I was not interested in helping people build solutions to like draw out trajectories for weapons. Like that was not something that I was interested in. If somebody else wanted to do that, I'm not going to stop them. But that was one of the clear lines that I wanted to draw to say I am not interested in enabling someone to do that. This also meant, and this sounds wild even to say out loud, this also meant communicating things to people like just because I didn't have kids didn't mean I couldn't work 24/7. Big shocker there. I did not understand entering industry, because it started very early, that people had this understanding that if I wasn't married, didn't have kids, all of these other things, that I could answer the phone any hour of the day, I was willing to help and do anything, and I just couldn't believe it. So when I said I was going offline, I meant it, and I encouraged my coworkers to do the same thing, because they didn't always get the comments that I did, but every once in a while I had to remind people that kids aren't the only reason that you should be offline in the evening hours and the weekends. As a manager, like I am now, you should also be encouraging people to communicate, to set up goals, to set up boundaries, and you should help everyone, including yourself, understand that everything can't be a top priority. If everything is a top priority, then there are no priorities. It's an indication that if you can't recognize the priorities, or if there are no priorities, how are you going to help your reports do that as well? So again, as I'm kind of thinking about how do I use that experience that I had for good, I'm now thinking of it in terms of how do I help my reports recognize when priorities have changed, when there are no priorities, or when there are too many competing priorities, to help them grow in their career goals and help them understand what boundaries they can set as well. It's just like the shakiest podium. So avoiding traps. Oh, this one was a really hard slide to pull together because I could rant, and I'm not going to do that too much. So I actually had other managers coming to me and my manager and said that I had to contribute because everyone else was, and that was false. I could name people, and I could ask, well, what is this person doing? What is that person doing? Oh, no, they're working on something different. They're working on something special. Well, why can't I do that? Why do I have to work on this thing? My skills aren't particularly relevant to this area. There's no reason that I need to do this. Why are you asking me and not these other people? Another really interesting moment happened where, and it still happens to this day, actually, it happened a couple weeks ago, where someone said, I can't believe you said no to a senior manager, senior director, VP, C-suite, whoever their title was. But the request from this person was, Amara, can you get on a plane in Austin and fly to Rhode Island in 6 hours? Like, we can book it, we can get you out the door, because we have a very important high priority customer that we need you to meet with. Did this customer just wake up this morning and say, we need an AI developer advocate from this company, blah, blah, blah? Like, what happened? The story shifted over the day as I said no to these emails and Slack messages and whatever else was coming in that was like, can you do this? No. Can you do this? No. Can you no? They had asked everyone on one team, they were busy. They had asked other people, they were also busy. So really, I was the last resort. So when I said no, it wasn't no, Amara, cannot do it. It turned into, we cannot support this particular high priority customer. And the very last email that I sent, when I said the answer is still no because this is an unreasonable request, I responded at the end, if nobody else can go, it sounds like this isn't an important high priority customer. And that apparently just set everyone off. How could you say that to a senior level VP, whoever, what? And I'm like, because it was unreasonable and ridiculous that no one else had to go to this important high priority customer and they could all continue doing their own business. Ridiculous. So I put together this lovely thing because I didn't want to go through all of the stories on here. But saying no doesn't support a growth mindset is absolutely ridiculous. Because if you do everything and you say yes all the time, you will never have the opportunity to grow in the way that you want to. It'll be in the way that everybody else wants you to grow. And that might not be the best way. Boundaries support healthy growth opportunities, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But everyone needs to focus on that. We talked about this at length. That's not always true. Who else is going to work on this, or this has to get done? This was my favorite one because it very clearly told me who was like on my side and who was supporting me, and who was upset because they were going to have to do the job themselves. Sorry, but I'm not here to do my job and everyone else's. And I truly believe that guilt-driven productivity cultivates burnout. So, how would this impact my personal brand? It didn't. I still get shit done. My coworkers became more thoughtful about their requests for my time and energy, and it was fascinating to watch them ask each other in a more thoughtful way as well. When I reached out for help or with opportunities, I always packaged them in a way that communicated the value to both them and me. So again, I was still asking people for help, they were still asking me for help, but it was packaged in such a way that everyone benefited from it, or they knew that without extensive investigation and extensive understanding of what needed to happen before we started that work. It also helped me recognize when to encourage and support others in saying no. So I've shifted how I offer opportunities or how I ask for help in saying, you can always say no. So if I need someone to help me with like an interview process, they need to be on a panel, I let them know, hey, you are my person that I need in this particular position for this interview panel, but if you are too busy, you have an out. You can say no. And people are super thankful for that. And I'm like, that's very easy for me to be like, hey, you can say no, because I can ask other people. There are other people. So some takeaways for you. I think it's really important to acknowledge that always saying yes or always saying no isn't always the best thing to do. But it does prepare you to make really solid decisions based on other people's responses. And this is maybe the biggest thing that I learned in this journey. So I have a couple of things here. One I think is maybe the biggest takeaway is stop doing thankless work. Duh. Or on the flip side of that, remember to say thank you. Then it's not thankless work. Consider a year of no, like I did, which I will admit was incredibly hard. But on the flip side of that, if you're feeling stuck or uninspired, go Shonda's route and do a year of yes and see if that's what you need. Or maybe you need some moderation, and that's fine too. Create those goals and boundaries, and then never stop communicating. If you communicate your goals and you communicate your boundaries, you're setting those expectations with other people, and they can help you. Because whether we're in our careers or at home, we're not on this journey through life by ourselves. So if you're not communicating these things, people will just not know. And with that, thank you.